Welcome. Thanks to everyone for being here and to Revive Wellness for having me. My name is Jennifer House, and I'm a dietitian with First Step Nutrition from Calgary, and I help to make feeding families easier. And today we're talking about feeding picky eaters. Now that we're all in self isolation, anxiety, and stress levels are high, the last thing we need is to be fighting at the dinner table with our kids. So, hopefully, I'm going to help to make meal times a little bit easier for you today. So if you're struggling with picky eaters, you're probably concerned that your child's not getting enough calories or maybe missing out on certain food groups, especially if they used to go to daycare or school and it's common for kids to eat better outside of the house. And now they're in the house for 3 meals and multiple snacks per day. And you might be worried that they're not getting enough to eat. You might be a shorter to cook, so making multiple meals for the family, perhaps an adult meal and a kid meal, or bringing out backup foods when your child refuses to eat the family food. You might also be feeling the need to bribe, pressure, or reward your child to eat. Otherwise, you feel like they'd never eat enough or they'd never try a bite of new food. And I have 3 kids. One was especially picky, so I can relate to how you're feeling. And today I'm going to briefly review why your child is a picky eater, the methods I use to help clients, and how you can get started decreasing those dinner time battles. So to start with, I like to take a look at why your child is a picky eater so that we can address some underlying conditions if they're there. And some of the reasons why your child is picky are totally normal and you can't do anything about it. You'll just have to ride with it. One of those being developmental stage. So after about a year of age, your child's growth slows down, which you'll know if you've looked at a growth chart. You can see the curve slows down, so their rate of growth slows, and therefore their appetite often decreases as well. So this is very normal, although lots of parents get concerned when they see their child all of a sudden eating less than they used to. And this age, between 1 and 2, a lot of personality develops. Your child likes to say no. There's very few things that they have control over, and whether or not they eat is one of them. And they often get a lot of attention around eating, especially if you're pressuring your child to eat, and they like attention, whether it's positive or negative. Another thing that happens around this age, between 1 and 2, often when your child becomes mobile, is called neophobia or fear of new foods. And some people think this is just natural because a long time ago, when kids were crawling around in the woods, we didn't want them putting everything in their mouth because it could have been poisonous. And now that's not as much of a concern, but it is totally normal for kids sometime between 1 and 2 years of age to start to become fearful of new foods. Now, there are some physical concerns too that you can help your child with. So, iron deficiency can actually lead to low appetite and poor growth. And it's a negative cycle because obviously, if your child has poor appetite, they're not getting in a lot of food, not getting in a lot of iron. And there are some signs for iron deficiency that you can watch for if your child gets sick a lot, if they are pale, if they are tired. My daughter, I found out she was iron deficient at age 4 because her hair was very thin and falling out. Now, if your child's over age 1 and they have not had their iron levels tested and they don't eat a lot, they don't get a lot of iron from their food, once we're out of this pandemic and you're able to go to your doctor, I would request a blood iron level test just to know. Other physical concerns. So if your child has constipation, allergies, reflux, they might associate pain with eating and therefore they don't want to eat. So these are other, underlying conditions that can cause picky eating. There can be oral motor concerns too, or difficulty chewing and swallowing. If your baby had difficulty breastfeeding, maybe they have a tongue tie that wasn't properly addressed, and that can often lead to difficulty eating solids as well. Or sensory struggles are another reason for picky eating. So if your child has perhaps decreased or increased ability to interpret smell, taste, touch, sight of everything, it's going to make eating very difficult since we use all of our senses. It's actually one of the most complicated things that your child can do. So signs that sensory might be challenging for your child. So if your child didn't mouth toys as a baby, if they really hate brushing their teeth, if they only seem to like one texture and they don't like getting dirty, they might have troubles with sensory aspects of food. And there are exercises that can be done. Generally, an occupational therapist will work with this will work on sensory with you if they specialize in eating, but even some simple things that you can do at home, just exposing your child to a lot of different textures outside of the table, so outside of the eating atmosphere, such as playing with sand, playing with Play-Doh, can get them used to touching and feeling different textures. And then the number one reason I see for pick eating in almost all of my clients, whether these other reasons are, present or not, is a broken division of responsibility in feeding. So what is the division of responsibility in feeding? DOR for short, or it's also called the trust model of feeding. If you haven't heard of it, it was created by Ellen Satter. She's a dietitian and social worker. And she says that when parents follow the division of responsibility, children grow up to become eating competent, which means they feel good about eating, they naturally eat the amount they need, they will learn to eat the foods their parents eat, and enjoy family meals. And the division of responsibility is endorsed by American Academy of Pediatrics and Canadian Pediatric Society, Dietitians of Canada. So basically all major health organizations do support this method of feeding children. And we'll get into this more in future slides, but just a quick overview. So parents have certain roles in feeding, the what, the when, and the where. And children have certain roles in eating, which are just if or how much. And Ellen Satter says that when parents do their jobs with feeding, children will do their jobs with eating. Just because I'm a bit of a research geek, having 2 science degrees, I want to delve into research very briefly. And in this first slide, just helps to explain that, well, the division of responsibility is endorsed by all those expert associations. The vast majority of parents are not following it in their home. One study to show this, it was published in the Journal of the American Dietetic Association, took a focus group of 101 moms of 2 to 5-year-olds, and they found that over 90% of the moms bribed, rewarded, short order cooked, or pacified their kids with food, which is not following the division of responsibility. And they also didn't believe the children when they said they were full. And so these other tactics that most parents use are focused around pressuring kids to eat. And does this work in feeding kids? Now, there's a lot of research articles that say no, it does not work. It actually does the opposite. And I think this one article that I'm going to pull out helps to explain that well. It was an experimental study, so it took 27 preschoolers, and they were looking at whether pressure affected the kids' food intake and their preferences for food. And what they found was that the kids actually consumed more food when they weren't pressured to eat, and they made fewer negative comments. So essentially, kids eat less, and they dislike the food even more when they're pressured to eat. And the children who were pressured also had lower BMI percentile scores, so they weighed less, which is interesting. And this could have been because when they come to the table, the kids who are pressured have cortisol or lots of stress hormones flowing, so they don't want to eat. None of us, would want to eat if we came to that atmosphere where everyone's anxious and there's yelling and all of that going on at the table. So, that's not really allowing kids to listen to their own appetite and eating to their own appetite. So I thought that was quite interesting. But the pressure, which we think we're doing to get our kids to eat more and eat what they need, actually backfires. So before I delve more into your roles and your children's roles in the division of responsibility, a little bit of background here on what I like to cover with my clients. So of course, I want to look at the children's growth and most often their food intake as well. So when plotting growth, I use the World Health Organization charts. You probably have your child's growth chart at home, so you can pull it out and take a look at it and see if they're following along their curve, no matter where the curve is. If they're on the 15th percentile, the 75th, below the 3rd, that's okay as long as they're generally following along their own curve instead of flatlining or losing weight. And also consider genetics. I get a lot of parents that are really, small people themselves expecting to have large babies or large children, which is just not going to be your child's normal growth pattern. And then when looking at food intake, I like to ask clients to record their child's food and fluid intake for 3 days. And often when they look at this and record it all, they find it makes them feel better and their child's actually eating much better than they thought. So taking a look whether your child's getting all the food groups, if there's any gaps, you might want to take these to a dietitian and get some advice on perhaps if supplements are required even in the short term to fill in any of those gaps. But I find food intake, recording it actually makes most parents feel better about the children's food intake. So getting more into your roles as a parent in the division of responsibility, the first one is what your child is offered to eat. And this is often a role that the children try and take control over. So we want to end this short order cook syndrome. So you don't need to bring out a backup food if your child refuses to eat the dinner. This very quickly turns into the child that only eats chicken nuggets and fries because they know that they can at every meal. Now, I often will get parents concerned that their child will not eat anything if they don't make them special food or their preferred food. So one way of getting around this is to offer a safe food at each meal. And a safe food is simply something a food that your child has eaten in the past. Maybe it's a bowl of bread, maybe it's the plain noodles, maybe a sliced cucumber. So it's not something special for your child, but it's offered to everyone as part of the meal. And you know that if your child's really hungry, they can eat just that food without having to experience stress or anxiety about branching out and trying new foods if they're, having a bad day or not feeling like it that day. And we can consider, making foods easier to eat for our kids. I'll take meat and vegetables as an example, as those are often the two food groups that children have most difficulty eating. Meat is not all that tasty. It can be really tough to chew. So it's totally okay to add a sauce like barbecue sauce or ketchup to make it a little sweeter and tastier and make it more tender. So, using ground meat or a pressure cooker or a slow cooker to make the meat tender. Lots of kids will often go for like chicken fingers or fish sticks too, because they're easy, nice and soft to eat and tasty. And for vegetables, again, they tend to be more bitter. They're hard and tough and can be difficult to chew. So adding a dip is fine, or, butter if they're cooked, make them tastier to eat. And then as for making them easier to eat, different kids try different, enjoy different things. Some kids only like raw vegetables, but some kids, they're too tough to eat. So I really like roasting vegetables. It brings out some of the sweetness and makes them nice and soft. So those are some ideas for making a couple foods a bit easier to eat. And I also like to try family style meals. And if you haven't heard of family style meals, this is when you put all of the foods in the middle of the table and everybody gets to serve themselves or decide what's on their plate. And even if you have a young child, you can ask permission to put something on their plate and help them with that. And this allows your child to have a little bit of control over what's on their plate, and they really like that. And it also decreases the yak or the complaining about the pre-plated food that you put in front of them at the beginning of the table, at the beginning of the meal. So some easy family style meals to get started with would be like a pizza where everybody gets to top their own pizza, or tacos and everybody gets to put, the toppings on their tacos at the table, but you can really do it with almost any meal. And Ellen Satter says, when planning meals, be considerate without catering. So you don't need to make every meal, a kid meal, but you can be considerate for their likes and preferences and include at least something that they can eat at each meal. And another one of the parents' roles in the division of responsibility is when your child eats. It's really common to see kids snacking all day, running around with some goldfish and juice, and this just doesn't allow them to build up an appetite, and they never experience hunger. So when they come to the meal, obviously they're not hungry and they're not going to eat. So parents tend to think that, okay, I'm going to get a bite in my kid whenever I can, and then they are eating little bits or bites throughout the day. And research shows actually children who eat that way actually end up eating less overall because they don't experience hunger and they don't have an appetite for their meals. So I like to have a kitchen closed rule between snack time and meal times, about 2 hours, depending on your child and their age, 2 to 3 hours is adequate. The kitchen is closed and your child can have water. That's it. You can distract them, go play. Say, you get to eat snack times in half an hour. And that will generally lead to them eating more at meal times. And your third role in the division of responsibility as a parent is where your child eats. So, ideally we want to eat together at the family table when we can, seated safely, especially important for safety for the younger kids. But it's also important, so when we look at adolescents, research shows that adolescents who have regular family meals, which is defined at 5 times a week, it can be breakfast, lunch, dinner, whatever works for your family. But they not only have a more nutritious diet, but they get better grades in school. They have healthier relationships, with their friends and peers, and they're less likely to be involved in drugs and alcohol. And family meals are actually more important to the older child's self-esteem and confidence than income levels, after school activities, family structure, or religion. So, they are crucial. So it's a great habit to get started with now when your kids are younger. And of course, we want to make family meals a pleasant place where everybody wants to come, creating some of those positive memories rather than a place where everybody comes and they're stressed and anxious and there's fighting and yelling, which is so often the case when we're feeding picky eaters. So we need to decrease anxiety and stress at the table. And one way we can do this is just by taking the focus off of food. We don't have to micromanage what or how much our children are eating. Instead of even commenting on the food, we can go around and have everybody say their highs and lows from the day or something they're grateful for, and they can eat what they're hungry for and what they like of the food that's offered. You can have some table rules, so it's great to have rules like no yuck at the table. Your child's allowed to say no thank you if they're offered something they don't want, but they can't say something is yucky or gross, and that's rude to the chef. You can also have a table rule where everybody has to sit at the table for, 5 minutes or 10 minutes, depending on how old your child is. If they don't like sitting at the table or coming to the table, you can just say, come to the table for 5 minutes and we're going to talk, but you don't have to eat. Now, Ellen Satter says what works is minding your own business. Eat and enjoy your own vegetables, and your child assumes someday I will eat them too. So your child's only roles, moving along to their roles in the division of responsibility, are how much they eat or if they eat at all. Whether they don't want to take a bite or they want 3 servings of something, that is totally fine. So talking about pressure a little bit, there's a lot of obvious ways we pressure our kids to eat by making them take a bite or 3 bites or finish their vegetables before dessert. And that's all obvious pressure, but there's lots of hidden forms of pressure too that, our child feels as pressure and we may not realize. For example, comparing them to a sibling, telling them they need to eat this to grow strong, or, even praising a child to eat. They take that as a form of pressure because then they know that when you don't eat, you're not happy. And we don't want our children to eat because mom and daddy want them to, or to get praised or for any reward either. We want them to eat because they're hungry. And kids' appetites really do go up and down. There may be a couple days in a row when they're not hungry. Maybe they're teething, maybe they're getting sick, maybe they're just not growing much. And they tend to make up for it the following week. And our appetites as adults tend to be fairly consistent, but kids really go up and down, and they are the only ones that know whether they're hungry. We cannot know that. That's great. It's a great skill to listen to your appetite, and we want them to keep that as long as possible. I do discourage hiding foods, so it's common for parents to puree vegetables and mix them or hide them into different foods to sneak vegetables in their child. But your child will figure it out at some point, and it's not following the division of responsibility because your child's not consciously choosing to eat that vegetable, and they'll have less trust of the foods you're offering them. Now, it's totally okay to make zucchini bread or green smoothies with spinach, but get your child to help you make them and add the spinach into the smoothie and just, have full disclosure about what's in the food. So one thing that you can say just to take the pressure off of everyone is you don't have to eat it. and not in an angry tone, just, very neutral. You don't have to eat it. And that ends future arguments or tears, right? So that's a very important line that you can say over and over. If your child continues to complain or whine and is not used to this, you don't have to eat it. Now, Ellen says you can only know how much a child needs to eat by how much a child does eat, which goes back to their changing appetite, like I was talking about. So hopefully that was just a quick review of the division of responsibility. As a quick summary, I want you to take away the pressure, obvious or hidden, have structured meals and snack times rather than, a free-for-all, and avoid short order cooking. Just offer one meal to the family with a safe food for your child. And this all sounds fairly simple, but in practice, it can be a total reframe of how you've been feeding your kids. It can take a lot of practice, it can take a lot of patience. So for a summary of this, of what we chatted about today and some more resources, text the word picky to 555-888, and you'll get that resource. And you can also visit my website, which is just firststepnutrition.com. I have a blog with lots of more information about feeding picky eaters, and I also have a free 3-part video series to help manage picky eating that you can sign up for right on my homepage. So thank you for being here, and again to Revive Wellness for having me. And cheers! Here's to creating, peaceful relationship with food and some of those positive family meals around the table.